So, good evening, everybody. We have Councillor Kahakawila with us on the phone for our meetings tonight. We have a meeting of Metchosin's Finance and Environment Committee, which will be followed by a meeting of Council. But before we get into either of these two meetings, I'm going to turn the table over to Councillor Little.
Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? Can I move this closer? Yeah, thanks, everybody. I just want to thank the community for their support, and I wanted to say, may the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Oh, I said I was going to cry. My sister and my daughter here.
Rachel and Lee, bless and heal our brother, Bernard Vincent Gerard Paul. May the blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let us say Amen.
Amen.
After reading it and reciting it in the English translation of Hebrew, we will consider our having said it together. Amen. Thank you, Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Councillor Little. All right, so we have our two meetings tonight, the Finance and Environment Committee, followed by Council. And I'd like to thank Councillor Little's sister and daughter for joining us this evening. Feel free to stick around as long as you'd like, and to head out whenever you'd like. All right, thank you. Because we have the two meetings tonight, we have public participation for both, and I would encourage people, if your public participation has to do with something on the Finance and Environment Committee agenda, please speak at public participation at that meeting, and likewise for Council. And if you're not sure, then just step right up. Okay? So we'll begin with the Finance and Environment Committee agenda. I have a couple of modifications to the agenda before we get going, and then I'll ask the committee if they have others. We have two pinks. That is two items that arrived too late to be put on the formal agenda, and so they're on pink paper for us here. One on road resurfacing, and the other, the APRM letter about policing costs. In addition to that, there's a little bit of misnumbering in the reports for information. So we do not have a chair's report on policing costs, though I can give an update if people are interested. So that means that 8A is no longer on the agenda, that 8B is now 8A, and 8C is now 8B. Okay? In addition to that, some of the information that was under 8A should be under 8B, but we'll get to that when we get to the reports for information. Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, we have no presentations, and now it's time for public participation for Finance and Environment Committee. Oh, I'm sorry.
Move approval as amended.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Rand, seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Opposed? Aye. Oh, thank you.
I'm a disembodied I this time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kay. All right, we have no presentation, so now there's an opportunity for public participation for Finance and Environment Committee. I would simply ask if you're making if you're bringing remarks to this committee, please mention your name and address at the outset.
Jay Shukin, Laban Road resident, and also speaking as president of the APRM. And I just wanted to pass on my sincere condolences, Councillor Little, and also from the APRM's executive as well. So again, and thank you as always for the amazing service you do to the community. So, I wanted to comment on the letter that we sent you earlier. And so in early May, we saw comments from Mayor Rands and the Soup News Mirror, and I just wanted to read the comments. These are not Mayor Rands' quotes exactly, but from the paper. It says, Mayor John Rands said council would have three choices to pay for the policing costs, the expected increase in policing costs. One option would be a punishing tax increase. The second, to boost residential development to increase Metchosin's population, which Rands ruled out, or to approve industrial zoning projects. So respectfully, the APRM does not believe that this is the moment to be narrowing the district's options for addressing those cost impacts. We don't believe that there is a need to rush to solutions to address our policing costs, particularly a solution that would challenge the official community plan, our distinct character, and our history. And toward that, we've made several suggestions in the letter to council that we sent on May 26, and I just wanted to review a few of these. So basic one, once we have the actual police costs confirmed, it's critical that a staff report be done on this issue, looking at the budget impacts for the next 5 years and projections on how the various tax classes could be impacted. Council, you might also ask for recommendations on the use of the Police Reserve Fund over the future. Now, we've also asked if there are opportunities, or that council look at opportunities for new sources of revenue outside of taxation. So for example, could we look at things like, look at the fees for matters like business licenses, building permits and inspections, and other permits? Case in point, an APRM member recently asked if there's merit in a higher business license fee for properties that have short-term vacation rental suites. And such a specific fee would recognize that properties earn revenue for their owners, but to our understanding, they do not necessarily pay additional property taxes. We've also asked if there are new cost recovery mechanisms for land use applications. Now, we believe the district should limit the costs and resources it expends on major land use applications such as subdivision or rezoning. Now, if there are going to be impacts to taxes, it's critical that we all pay our fair share. And with that, we have also asked council to consider a few actions. Now, first of all, we asked and wondered if BC Assessment has the most accurate data on housing types and sizes for every parcel in Metchosin, particularly for recently built homes. Another issue, we understand that since the start of the pandemic, BC Assessment has automatically allowed properties that were granted farm status prior to the pandemic to continue with that status without requiring proof of farm income. Council can ask BC Assessment to review the properties in Metchosin to ensure that the existing farm status is accurate. And the difference in assessed value, I think, as we all know, of certain properties could be substantial at over $1 million potentially. One other thing, we note that property owners that operate non-agricultural businesses on ag land enjoy substantial tax advantages, and that fact might also play itself out related to business license fees, as we note above. So totally, we recognize that the solution with policing costs is challenging, and we just ask for careful consideration and discussion as we move along. And I have to say, continued careful consideration. So very much appreciate the way this has been handled to date. We just have to continue to work closer and look at options for ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Just before you go, I'll just mention that about a week and a half ago, Mayor Rands and I met with our Chief Financial Officer, Sam Weller, and we asked Sam to explore a variety of funding options that might be available for policing, and we'll ensure that Sam has a copy of your letter as reference for his deliberations. He'll be bringing a report back to probably our next Finance and Environment Committee meeting.
Wonderful. Thanks, Councillor McKenna.
Bev Bacon, Metchosin resident. Nice to see you all. I bet you thought I'd converted to being a black box. Well, here I am, not even afraid of you. And I'm talking to your environmental strain of this meeting. And there are so many aspects to the subdivision of the Beckingham place that I just want to talk to the environmental parts of it. I'm delighted. I mean, I love the idea of amenity development, and I hope this can go ahead with piped water. And I'm delighted that you're sending it to MEASC for their opinion. But rather than just ask MEASC, is there environmental value here? Well, there's environmental value everywhere. I'd like to see you expand their role. I mean, they're doing a professional job, much as in other districts they would have an environmental planner. Let them be in the environmental planner for us, and it's really great service we're getting from them. So these are sort of additional tasks that I would give them. And I seem to be, sometimes I work in rhyme, this time it's sort of an alliteration, but it's not cute. I'm offering some suggestions to consider when tasking MEASC with making recommendations for 4696 Beckingham, that they cover wind, water, wildlife, forest, fire, floods, fencing, roadways, and driveways. If you could expand all of those under their mandate. Wind. When looking at this and any new proposal for subdivision, I think we should be considering climate change. Now we have more extreme weather events, and to that I had 5 big trees blow down this year, 3 big trees blow down last year, and I've been in that farm for 22 years, and this is different. And to what extent, we could ask to what extent will cutting of trees lead to blowdown of other trees? We're getting some terrific winds in Metchosin. Is there a subdivision plan that will minimize loss of trees? That was wind. Number 2, water. To what extent will new wells lead to loss of water on other properties? Subdivision of this property was turned down previously, about 40 years ago, I'm told, because it was deemed too big a threat to the fragile water source for other properties. The demands and potential demands on Aquifer 606 are greater now than they were back then. I'd like it if the subdivision could proceed with the stipulation that there must be piped water. The next W is wildlife. I think it can be assumed that the large mammals that frequent Blinkhorn Lake and Blinkhorn Mountain are likely to pass through this property. Is there a subdivision plan that can minimize the possibility of conflict between people and large predators? If they have a cougar in the yard, they're going to be scared, they're going to want it destroyed. But, the cougars need a place to be, and maybe MEASC can say, well, this could be the corridor. And I don't think, personally, that what they're offering us as little as trails and things, I don't think we need that as park and trails. I think we need a chunk of undisturbed land where wildlife can be. Now on to the F's. Forests. Forests are more important now than ever before for carbon sequestration, shade, shelter, and cooling effects. What configuration of lots would best allow the trees to perform their services? Next F is fire. Would MEASC agree that piped water would reduce the risk of losing our forests to fire? Next F is floods. I understand from neighbors near the Beckingham property that their low-lying areas are subject to seasonal flooding. To what extent will clearing of trees for building sites and roads impact flooding on other areas? And I would say, what we thought of as the 200-year event is now upon us more often, so flooding is a concern. And I used to know somebody that lived at Beckingham and Kangaroo Road, and he told me that his field was underwater in winter. So we would want to know the flooding history and the flooding potential for not just that property, but for the neighboring properties. And fencing. would MEASC agree that fencing, if any, should be friendly to animals? And I believe that Wild Ark has suggestions for some do no harm fencing. I'd love to see that when, people are building and developing in Metchosin. I'd like to have some information on that, because they would probably do the right thing if they knew what the right thing was. And lastly, roadways and driveways. Perhaps MEASC can recommend a way to minimize roads. Perhaps they would comment on the advantage of gravel roadways and driveways. And so in conclusion, I think that the question put to MEASC could be bigger than, is there significant environmental value here? MEASC might have ideas for what works best for the wildlife, the woods, and the water table. They may come up with an ideal plan. I like the idea of size and shape of lots varying according to terrain. I'm excited that somebody's proposing to do something creative like that, and it would be very nice to have low-impact housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Is there other input for Finance and Environment Committee? Avril.
Thank you. Avril Yoakum, Windfall Road. No disrespect to our MEASC group, but they are in fact volunteers, and I think it's asking a lot to expect them to have the whole ball of wax of knowledge on how to protect our environment. The one thing I haven't heard mentioned at all for Beckingham is it's a fish-bearing creek. So somebody's not doing their homework. And I think that's why it's good to bring in your different government levels to look after the environment. MEASC has opinions, but I don't think we can rely on that as a basis for how the subdivision should go. So, and maybe somebody could contact Department of Fisheries on Hewitt Creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Avril.
Patty Whitehouse, 5311 Rocky Point Road. I think that most members of council know that I have a particular interest in bullfrogs from my experience in Highlands, and so I want to address a few comments to the bullfrog report from Stan Orchard. I fully understand that he and his crews were not able to get out very often last summer due to weather concerns mostly, and I'm glad that they were able to do as much as they did on the 2 nights they did get out. But I note that the fact that they were not able to get out earlier resulted in at least 5 females spawning 50,000 eggs, a potential of 5,000 or so young juveniles this year to grow into adults and spawn again. I'm just wondering whether it might be worthwhile for the district to, and the other part of what brings me here tonight is that in the past month there have been 2 posts that I was aware of on Metchosin Facebook about bullfrogs, one with a picture of a juvenile, the other with a picture of an adult female. And I was able to provide some information to the posters, including about the humane protocol that the province provided to the Highlands for euthanasia of bullfrogs that have been caught in the process of bullfrog control. So I'm just wondering whether it might be worthwhile for Metchosin to consider developing a bullfrog education program for the district so that people who particularly are on waterways or near water ponds and so on that are not covered by the control program to exercise some control themselves, and that's certainly something I would be happy to help with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. Right, I'm seeing no other public participation here. I'm just gonna put this down because moves us to agenda item 4, adoption of the minutes of Finance and Environment Committee of May 9th, 2022. Moved by Councillor Little, seconded by Councillor Epp. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Councillor Kahakawila. I appreciate it. I must remember. I'll put a little sticky on the phone or something.
Or would it be better if I had an opposing vote that I speak up? It's just whatever's going to make it easier.
Sure. I don't think it's a problem if you want to vote aye or nay.
Okay, sounds good.
So we'll move on to item 5, receipt of minutes of MIASC of May 24th.
Move receipt.
Moved by Mayor Rand, seconded by Councillor Little. Any questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? That passes. All right, that brings us to item 6A, business arising, the chair recommendations report, which is on page 11 of your agenda package. And as in past years, when we were considering grants in aid, the Finance and Environment Committee asked me to take the applications, circulate them among councillors, take their input, and bring, if I can, consensus recommendations back to this group here. And I think these recommended grants here represent consensus recommendations from the councillors that I heard back from.
Councillor McKinnon,
Yes, Councillor Kahakawila.
I'd like to recuse myself from the Vancouver Island Self Film and Media Commission. It's a perceived conflict of interest. My husband is on the board of directors. There's no pecuniary conflict of interest, but just a perception.
Before you recuse yourself from, because we're voting on all of the recommendations together,
Could we separate it?
we can separate it. We can pull that one out. All right, so you would like to pull that one out. We can do that one and we can vote separately on that. Absolutely.
I'm just wondering if anybody else has any conflicts of interest, like with the preschool, or I don't.
I suspect I have been involved with the Habitat Acquisition Trust, but
But you're
I'm not an employee or a board member or anything like that, just for full disclosure. So I'm not concerned about voting on that one. Okay,
It
so
has to be a direct pecuniary interest anyways.
yeah, so this is where we are with these. These are my recommendations. Any comments on them? Yes, Councillor Little.
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that IACD, the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, will be given 500. I think that's absolutely marvelous and very generous of the District of Metchosin.
It will be a much better picnic this year.
Absolutely.
Because that money has been traditionally used to fund their annual picnic. Good, okay, so at Councillor Kahakawila's request, then let's separate out the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission. So let's go with recommendation 1 then. I would move that Finance and Environment Committee recommend to Council that the above amounts be awarded as 2022 grants in aid for all but the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission. Second by Councillor Kahakawila. All in favor and
Aye.
opposed. All right, and this time without Councillor Kahakawila, I move that Finance and Environment Committee recommend to Council that the above amount be awarded to the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission as a 2022 grant in aid, seconded by Councillor Little. All in favor and opposed, and that also passes. Thanks, everybody. All right, number 7, reports for action, the Metchosin Bullfrog Management Project results for 2021. I have, before we move on to our plans for 2022, are there any comments or questions about Stan's report for 2021 activities? As Patty mentioned in her participation, it was really frustrating trying to get Stan and his crew out there. I don't know if you remember what it was like in spring of 2021, but it was like every single evening it was either windy or raining or both. It was an extraordinary spring, and it was, I wouldn't have noticed it so much except that I was waiting to get Stan and his crew out there. And we'd have a beautiful day that would be perfect for it, and then in true Metchosin fashion, the wind would come up in the afternoon and ripple the water and make it not work. For all of that, I think they did a good job. We have an agreement with them for 2022. We have funding in place for the amount of work that he's recommended here. The Bullfrogs, like everything else in Metchosin, is late in development this year because of our cold, wet spring. But what we need to do is get these locations to stand as soon as possible. So Patty, we should chat about the Facebook contacts. We have one public communications report of Bullfrogs, and let's touch bases tomorrow, let's say, and we'll try and get these to stand as soon as possible. Yes, Councillor Ept and Councillor Little.
Well, I like the idea of the education portion that Patty mentioned, that we could, I mean, I know there's a lot of information on them already, and it would be great if some of it could be on the district website, that people would have about those needed items. And I'd also, I mean, I enjoyed the report. It would be nice to know where those sites are. They just mentioned, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
We have records of them, but they're people's property.
Oh,
so
I
we're
see.
not going to
Oh, I
publicly
see.
mention
Okay.
the properties. Yes, Councillor Little.
Yeah, I was going to, I'll echo Councillor Epps' comments as well. I think, like we did with the Dogs in Metchosin Working Group, educational campaign, I think it has worked, and that was precedent setting, actually. A committee that sets up to be educational, a small committee, ad hoc sort of thing, and I think this would be a great idea.
Metchosin with frogs in Metchosin working group.
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Excellent. I think some combination of an article on our district website and in the Metchosin Muse might be the best way of letting the community know. But how about if I follow up with Patty and with Stan on that? So the action item is that I'll follow up with Patty Whitehouse and Stan Orchard on getting those materials together. All right. Anything else on the Bullfrog Management Project? Okay. We'll move on to the reports for information. As I mentioned, this agenda wasn't supposed to have a policing costs item on it, but just to repeat what I mentioned during the public participation, Mayor Rands and I have asked Sam Weller to investigate all possible options for financing of our increased policing costs, and Sam will be bringing a report back, I suspect, to the next Finance and Environment Committee meeting. Is that your recollection, Mayor Rands?
And Sam is going to attempt to negotiate a better price.
Okay, so this brings us to the staff report on council council quarterly financial update. And this is on page 9. This is where it gets really complicated. Is everybody sitting down? Okay, what was supposed to be on the memo on page 19 is actually the material that's on the memo on page 17. So where on page 17 it says RE policing costs, that's actually the information for the memo on page 19, the first quarterly financial update. You with me? Okay, so if we go to page 17, and forget that it says policing costs, this is actually the memo about the first quarterly financial update. Just notes that staff provided council with a detailed budget to actual report of the first quarter of, it says 2021, should say 2022, summary attached. As the budget's only just been approved and this is the first quarter of the year, there are no significant variances and no projections that differ from the approved budget. However, staff have flagged certain accounts that council should monitor for the rest of the year, including unpredictable revenue sources like building permits and interest income, as well as expenses that have traditionally come under pressure, like contractor fees and fire equipment. And that refers to the first quarterly update, which is on page 20 of the agenda package. And this has always been distributed to councillors, but not always posted on the agenda of Finance and Environment Committee meetings. But this is a better way of putting it on the public record, I think. And it basically says, because we've just approved the budget, because this is our first quarterly report, it's actually pretty close to where we projected so far, but here are some things we'll be keeping an eye on. And stay tuned for the second quarterly report. It's only by the time we get to our third quarterly report that we really start to panic. And you will have a new council at that point. Councillor Little.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think it's great to have this for the public, and that's great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's just for information unless anybody has any thoughts on it. Councillor Kahakawilla?
No thoughts. Look good.
Okay. Wanted to be sure and recognize the phone at least once here during the meeting. Okay, then let's move on. Again, a report for information, though we'll certainly take any input here. This is our staff report on our 2022 reserves balances, and that's on page 21 and 22, the memo, and page 23, all of the reserves balances.
Move receipt.
Move receipt by Mayor Rands, seconded by Councillor Epp. Any questions, discussions on this? I think it should be fairly, hopefully, self-explanatory. Okay, and with no other business, I will accept a motion for adjournment of Finance and Environment Committee.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Little, seconded by Councillor Kahakawilla. All in favor? Opposed? And we are adjourned. We'll now pause